Depression is an emotion as old as mankind. Perhaps this is a reason why we sometimes fail to look at it as a disease.
There's so many variables as to what causes depression, but such a giant number.
My sister was like, you need to see somebody.
What did she say that got you to finally go?
Well, she's like, you're sleeping till 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Like, something's not right.
People around this country, and for that matter around the world, are reacting tonight to the terrible news of the death of Robin Williams. A statement from his wife confirming his death alludes to his battle with depression, and now we know why.
If we fail to recognize and treat depressions as such, nothing we do for our patient will help him. He may get worse, and there's always the danger of suicide in the background.
I'm going to this doctor's office and having these full-blown psychedelic experiences at the doctor's office.
Yeah. And then 2 hours later, you're out on the street feeling completely normal.
What was your ketamine experience like?
I laid on a sofa in a therapist's office for 2 hours, and I was out on the street again 2 hours later. There was just this relief, especially afterwards, like in the week and a half or so afterwards, just felt this lightness.
My name is Gregory Scott. I am a spiritual modality scout. My passion and mission in life is discovering holistic practices that are unfamiliar to the general public. By understanding these modalities and sharing them with others, my hope is to empower people with an opportunity to heal. I received an email one day from a good friend of mine. She was excited to tell me about a clinic located in Bonita Springs, Florida that focused on treating mental health issues with a form of unconventional treatment using ketamine.
Ketamine clinic in Bonita Springs to show you what it does mean.
It's among the places offering the increasingly popular ketamine therapy for depression and other disorders. Michael allowed us to film his 5th session. No, it's not nap time, but time for a ketamine injection.
Ready?
Enough here to create a dissociative effect, a psychedelic experience.
It's not the cure-all because we have to find that within ourselves.
I contacted Myself Wellness to ask if I could visit their clinic and learn more about their operation. They welcomed the opportunity to teach me more about ketamine.
Sometimes it's a sickness. Mankind has lived with it since the beginning of recorded history. King Saul suffered from severe depression. So did Abe Lincoln, who was so afraid of his melancholy, he refused to carry a gun for fear he'd shoot himself. And Winston Churchill, who called it his black dog. The only other type of treatment available then was electroconvulsive therapy, shock treatment. And that was so primitive at the time that the cure really could be worse than the disease.
We have this, huge problem with depression. I think there's 17 million people that are depressed. There's 50 million people who are in chronic pain. A lot of the cognitive behavioral therapists they're not as effective as we thought, and the antidepressants aren't as effective as we thought. A lot of people are suffering, and a lot of the suffering has to do with trauma.
I mean, I went through many years of once-a-week counseling. Like, I could sit here and solve a business problem, or I could start a new company, or I could do this and that. But my own personal life was crap. I just wasn't happy. And with everything I've accomplished and been a part of, you would think I'd found some happiness in all of it, and I haven't.
I was placed in a partial hospitalization program, and during that time, I was told that my medication was no longer working. I was devastated.
Helplessness, being lost, being stuck, a feeling of being worthless. Those are feelings that can be present and that can take someone over the edge.
I arrived in Bonita Springs and met with Charles Patty, the brand ambassador for My Self Wellness. Charles told me his life as a family man is a dream come true. Considering at one point, he didn't think he'd ever have freedom from depression and substance abuse. The next day, we sat down for an interview so I could understand how this treatment really worked for him. So how were you able to transition your fiance and child to believe in you enough to say, I want to quit the 9-to-5, but you knew this was your passion and you wanted to live it every day and you wanted to help others with it?
I have to say that it wasn't an easy task, and there was definitely a lot of stress on her part, but I was set up to be very monetarily successful, but it wasn't fulfilling at all because I felt like I was wasting my knowledge on the things that helped me in life. We really took a big leap of faith, and I quit my job, and we had a wellness center that we were going to start doing, yoga and qigong and meditation classes. And our first medical director had actually came through for a tour of the facility, and at the end of it, he looked at us and he's like, "You guys ever heard of ketamine before?"
What is up, everybody? It is 1:50 in the afternoon, and I'm gonna give you guys a preview of our next building. And then we have our offices to do the actual ketamine treatments out of. And we have a lot of them.
I went through a lot in my life, and over 20 years of suffering through addiction and alcoholism. And if I would have went through all of that and didn't help people with the way that I healed and actually got my message out there about that, there's hope. There's hope for people out there that are suffering from depression and anxiety. There's hope for people that have substance abuse issues that they just can't seem to get away from. My life was a mess, I used to drink excessively, and I used to use all kinds of different substances to give myself that sense of relief. I started drinking at a really young age. I think I started sneaking bottles of beer and booze when I was 7 or 8 years old from the refrigerator when people weren't looking and stuff like that. I was just I don't know, I was really lost and I was hurting inside. And I had, had a couple glasses of wine that my family had given me, through my early years, where it's your parents are like, here, have a sip of alcohol or whatever, and you have a sip. And I felt this sense of relief instantly, and it made me feel so much better that I was just like, okay, this is what I need in my life. Like, this is what's gonna fix this void that's inside of me. And I was never a social anything. Like, I was trying to escape. I was just trying to get drunk or get high and not have to feel any of the feelings that I had been feeling. I was so miserable all the time. And I could be in the most crowded room that you could possibly be in, and I felt more alone than anything. I wanted to not feel like that anymore so badly, but nothing worked. I got in trouble, I'd sober up for a little while, I'd end up going to meetings for a little bit, and then all of a sudden, you know, I'd be sober and my life, like, I still just felt so depressed and alone and had so much anxiety. And the only thing that ever gave me that relief was to use substances and drink alcohol. So that was what I always resorted back to.
Trauma can be many things. Trauma can be an event or an experience that causes pain or suffering, and trauma can also stay within our body. And so trauma really is experiences that limit us.
Almost all of the maladies that we call depression, trauma, sadness, are blocks, active inhibitions of the natural flow of loving energy within us.
In my mid-20s, I started looking for ways to heal my anxiety that were away from medication. I had fought with it off and on for so many years just because I didn't want to be tied to a medicine. But, you know, because of wanting to succeed in society and, you know, function, I would give in and I would start another regimen of antidepressants and anxiety medication and things to that nature. In my journey, I found out, you know, certain roots. What I was suffering was in fact PTSD, and that my roots were my traumas and things that I had suffered as a child. My healing journey began from there. I started meditating and I started to do yoga, and I learned herbology and I practiced Ayurvedic medicine, and I learned as much as I could so that I can take those things and put them into my own life practice. Nothing ever stuck. The symptoms always came back for some reason. It didn't matter how much I meditated. The anxiety would take over and sometimes it would be crippling.
Western medicine has a lot to do with giving someone a diagnosis, and when you give someone a diagnosis, they go home with that diagnosis, and it actually plays a lot into their physiology. They start feeling that they now are a victim of this condition, as opposed to giving people hope for the fact that they can reverse conditions or they can make lifestyle changes to prevent disease or, you know, promote wellness.
I've always been one of those people to put things on a docket and then finish it as quick as possible without really experiencing it. You know, it wasn't about the experience, it was about the ends to me. I never took pride or even took a minute to even think about it. Once I accomplished something, it was just like, okay, what next? I've always been like that. It's just, you know, I never lived in the moment. I was just like, I was always busy planning on like, what's the next moment? And then when I got to the moment, it's kind of empty and void, because the whole goal was to get to that moment, and then it's done. And it's like, okay, I gotta find another one. It's twofold. It's like, myself is like, I expect greatness. I don't make anybody do, or and none of my employees, I don't push anybody. I expect them to want to be great. I also show the way to do it, and I help lead the path. I don't just sit back and like harp. I'm like, here, let me show you how to do this and be great. So sometimes my expectations are kind of high, really high what I expect of people. And the second thing is I think sometimes those expectations are brought upon from like a childhood of having somebody really, nothing you did was good enough. You know, no matter how great you did, you're still were a bad kid or you were this. So you couldn't win no matter what. I had an abusive mom. It got to be where I was about 13, I started using drugs regularly, drinking and drugs. I'd go on a weekend and I just want to erase my mind. I don't want to be numb. That's all I wanted. I wanted to feel nothing. I wanted to think nothing. I wanted to feel nothing. I didn't care how sick I got. And then if I felt good, sometimes it lasts 2 or 3 months. I've just got so much on my plate right now. I don't know where to deal with it emotionally. So I'm just going to suppress it. I mean, that's what I would do.
Whether it's through a doctor or through the local connection or whatever it was, yeah, those resources were something that I was exhausted, and they're more addictive than helping. They get you more hooked, like, oh, I gotta have it, and then it causes other issues. So the side effects, which, you know, constipation and itchy and all this other crazy stuff, that's like, are you really helping, or you're not really doing much? Those other avenues have been exhausted, and I won't say at the end of my rope, but I was pretty close there, and the end of the rope had a little bit of grease on the end of it too. I was tired of all the other opioids and alcohol and all this other stuff that was coming in. Oh, let's just drink your sorrows away and this. I wanted to try something different. I was just tired of being tired of being tired.
I'm a pain management physician. I trained at University of Miami, and I was very frustrated with the tools that I had to treat our chronic pain patients in South Florida. I started realizing that there's more to pain than just physical tissue damage, and that's what we were really taught during our training, is that people who suffer from pain, we can give them pharmaceuticals, we can do injections, physical therapy, but we were forgetting about the psychological or emotional component of patients suffering. I was seeing more mental health. I was seeing anxiety, insomnia, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder. We have to treat the whole person and have a more holistic approach to treating pain management. And instead of just putting a needle or giving a pharmaceutical, really empowering the patients to take on their own health in their own hands.
I resigned my job after 20 years. I put in my resignation and I gave them 2 months. Unfortunately, during those 2 months, I ended up in the hospital. And during that time, I was told that my medication was no longer working. I was devastated. Management had suggested to me before my resignation that maybe I should go seek some help and possibly even get on Adderall, just so that I could get more on task and be more focused at work, without realizing that, you know, what was really going on was how depressed I was. And so when I went to go seek help, they pretty much said that it was not Adderall that I needed, and in fact my depression was pretty severe. So I was suggested ECT therapy by the doctors at the hospital.
Are telling the story of her inner induced unhappiness.
You know, consider this because it was my only option. And I knew that somehow that it wasn't, that there was something else out there for me, but I wasn't sure what it was.
I mean, I went through many years of once-a-week counseling. And here I'm going through all the therapy doing the same bad things that I did before. I would drive around town every day wondering, like, what is today bringing? Like I could sit here and solve a business problem, or I could start a new company, or I could do this and that. But my own personal life was crap. I just wasn't happy. And with everything I've accomplished and been a part of, you would think I'd found some happiness in all of it, and I haven't. So I was like, this isn't working, it's time to find something new.
To understand ketamine treatment better, Charles referred me to Dustin Robinson.
He's licensed in Florida as an attorney, certified public accountant, and a real estate agent. Please give it up for Mr. Dustin Robinson. Yay! That's what ladies and gentlemen are like, yay! Thanks so much for being here today, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we were having a nice little conversation even before we started recording.
Clinical trials studying the effects. Dustin Robinson is co-founder of a nonprofit behind the push to legalize psychedelics.
To some extent, it's an individual rights issue, but also we're in a mental health crisis right now.
Normal psychiatric pharmaceutical products right now, when you need to take them, you take them and you go home. So whether it's Zoloft, Xanax, whatever it is, you see a psychiatrist, you get prescribed, and you go home and come back 2 months later and you tell the psychiatrist how you're doing and whether they're helping. Now, that whole paradigm is not working. We're in a mental health crisis and the current pharmaceuticals are not working. So the history of psychedelics is a very rough history. So, it started really not just decades ago, really centuries ago, but we'll start really in the 50s and the 60s is when they were really starting to have tremendous discoveries about the mental health value of some of these psychedelics. Mainly in the 60s, they were looking a lot at LSD for alcohol abuse, and tremendous discoveries were being made.
And I just reached up, and it was like somebody grabbed me. I interpret this as, for the first time in my life, I wanted love.
What happened was, towards the end of the 60s, the hippie counterculture got their hands on these substances and started, maybe abusing these compounds, and a couple bad things happened. And then you saw in the 70s, we had the war on drugs. And that's when pretty much all these substances were placed as Schedule I compounds, except for ketamine. Ketamine is the only psychedelic right now that's actually FDA approved.
Now an old drug is being used in a new way to help people in the desperate grip of depression, and the results have been astounding, researchers.
Could a drug stop suicidal thoughts in hours? Literally, it's an incredible thing to even suggest.
Millions of Americans suffer from depression that doesn't respond to medication, but for some, the drug ketamine could be a breakthrough.
I'm actually very excited about ketamine because there's so much that we're going to be able to uncover about people's suffering, and there's a lot that we're going to be able to prevent. Ketamine is really a reset. We recalibrate what's going on in the body, and it's almost like a snow globe that you shake up, and that's what happens during a ketamine session, and you kind of reorganize your brain. A lot of us are living with this disorganized brain, and it has to do with chronic stress. So we're able to relieve this stress during the time of these ketamine sessions.
And what's happening with ketamine right now is that they're actually using it for its off-label use. What off-label use is when FDA-approved drug that has been approved for one particular indication, in this case it's ketamine that has been FDA approved as an anesthetic, when that drug that has been FDA approved is now being used for another indication for some sort of mental health issue, whether it be depression, PTSD, or whatever it might be. What happened was all this research was coming out and all this science was coming out on the benefits of ketamine for various mental health issues. And so more and more doctors started using it off label, started building more and more evidence of the benefits of ketamine for these mental health issues. And so currently doctors are mainly using ketamine off label when they're using it for patients. What's really interesting is that Charles actually reached out to me like 1 week after I had just had my first ketamine experience. Now I have this guy who's really leading this movement with respect to ketamine, and I thought it was just a kind of something special that the timing was just so perfect for us to connect.
This is the now generation. They feel disenchanted with the world around them. While they may, for the most part, be outside the mainstream of American life, they are a part of the wave of the future.
So a huge misconception about psychedelic medicines is that it's something from the 60s and the 70s and it was just for hippies, and now it's just becoming something amazing in the mental wellness field. These medicines have been being used for thousands of years by indigenous people. You know, ayahuasca is a great example of that. You know, these medicines have been used in healing ceremonies. It's profound what happens when you take these medicines.
So I was very inspired by the changes that Charles made in his life, even through the short time that we have been together. He was still drinking when we were together and, you know, still having these attitude adjustments. And through the use of ketamine, he totally changed into a different person.
You know, so it's like you start taking something to have the relief, and then it doesn't give you the relief anymore, and then you stop taking it and you're even worse off than you were to begin with. So it's like the ketamine was the thing that did the opposite of that for me. It really took me from all of these peaks and valleys, these highs and lows in my mood and demeanor, and it just brought me to such a cool, calm, and centered place where it's just like, I hate to use the word, but it's more or less magical. It took away any of the issues of the past that I had. It made me not focus on any of the traumas that I had, and it helped me process any traumas that I had gone through, but it also kept me from looking too far in the future also. It gave me the ability to love myself enough to actually want to change my life too. And now it's brought me to a place, because I've done enough healing on my journey, that I can actually give back to others. And that's really what the ultimate end goal is for me, was to get to a place where I could use my story to help other people realize that no matter what kind of the pits of their own personal hell that they're living in, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And there is hope for people to get pulled out of that deep, dark place.
During my discovery of psychedelic medicine, I wanted to understand what defines a psychedelic. Classic psychedelics like LSD, psilocybin, DMT, and mescaline are hallucinogens. Once ingested, these medicines work on the serotonin receptors in the brain. Ketamine is considered a dissociative, which means it impacts different receptors. Instead of serotonin, ketamine works on what is known as the NMDA receptors. Scientifically speaking, ketamine does not meet the requirements to be a psychedelic. Many professionals regard it as a psychedelic due to the hallucinogenic effect it can produce once administered.
I had no experience with psychedelics. I'd never tried a psychedelic, didn't know much about it. My assumptions about psychedelics were that they weaken the body, they're debilitating, they make you hallucinate, they're for hippies, they're for druggies. And you know, you build up these assumptions generally through experiences. So, you know, when I see that a stove is lit up, through experience, I've touched it and it's hot. So when I see a stove lit up now, my assumption is that that stove's hot there, so I'm not gonna touch it. That's a good assumption to have, but we also have assumptions that we have that are simply social constructs that have been put into our mind that we sometimes don't question. And for me, that was thinking that psychedelic compounds were drugs and they were bad for you. Not through any experience that I had even had, just because society had told me that. And sometimes you really need to scrub down these assumptions so that you could really let the light shine through and understand what you're dealing with. And so I've, you know, tried ketamine as well. In a doctor's office, honestly, most of my experiences with psychedelics are not in recreational ways, it's in therapeutic ways, trying to really enhance my level of consciousness and understanding about the world around me.
So ketamine is a dissociative anesthetic. So it's been used in the OR to put people to sleep, for different procedures, and for pain management. And it was FDA approved in 1970. So it's a synthetic medication, but it has a very interesting mechanism. And they've noticed that it can work for mental health, like depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, for the fact that it works on the NMDA receptor. So this receptor plays a role in glutamate activation. And glutamate is an excitatory neurotransmitter. So we're used to things like serotonin, dopamine. Glutamate is another neurotransmitter, and it sometimes becomes excitotoxic. And so when this happens, the whole nervous system really becomes amplified or excited. And so a lot of times with chronic conditions like chronic pain, depression, people are living in a body that their nervous system is really overactive. And so working on the NMDA receptor helps to calm down this wind-up phenomenon. So I have a lot of friends that are actually paramedics. And when I was doing ketamine initially, I was talking to them about the dose they were using when they were helping a patient. And so their doses are obviously much higher, and that's because a lot of times the person that the paramedics are dealing with, they're combative, right? And they're trying to calm them down, trying to sedate them a little bit. So we know that ketamine's really very safe. It doesn't cause respiratory suppression like the opioids. Ketamine is a great option to introduce as a pain medication post-operatively. It's great for the emergency room because we're able to control the patient and still hemodynamically keep them stable. There's no cardiorespiratory effects. It can increase blood pressure, and that's one side effect that we look out for, and we always monitor their blood pressure.
If my 18-month-old toddler needed to have surgery or dislocated something on him, they would probably give him ketamine. And that just goes to show how safe it is. In Vietnam, it was actually called the buddy drug because if we had gone to war and my partner had gotten shot or something had happened to him, I could administer him the ketamine.
So ketamine-assisted psychotherapy is one way of using ketamine. There's what we call psycholytic or psychedelic. Psycholytic is when we do a low dose of ketamine that just kind of opens them up, and then they can do talk therapy during their session. Psychedelic is a higher dose. Both of them can have therapy involved, but one is during the session and one is usually a follow-up within 48 hours after. Now, the benefit of having a therapist speak to the patient is that they really help to hone in on their specific intention.
Intention means you're tuning in to some current in you that says, I want to heal. Something has to change. If you have doubts, that doesn't matter. It's the purity of your intention that's the keel of the boat here.
Between the ketamine, which resets you, and then the lifestyle change that we encourage everybody to make, people have been able to relive their lives again. People have been able to relive a better version of themselves again.
Ketamine is kind of like a Control-Alt-Delete for the old program. Okay, the program that no longer serves us. And then what it does is it gives you an opportunity to put a new program into place. A lot of us have been taught to, if we have a traumatic experience in our life, to stuff it in the back of our heads and just, not deal with it, don't show any emotion, keep moving forward, emotions make you weak, and that's not how we're supposed to live as human beings. So what the ketamine's really doing is it's going and it's taking the blocks down from these past traumas and letting people process these traumas so that they no longer hinder them from moving forward in life anymore. And there's really nothing else out there that's getting this accomplished like the ketamine-assisted therapy is.
I had heard about it just very vaguely, but never really researched it very much. Because I was in my journey, I was looking for alternative methods to healing. And so when I met Christina and saw the beautiful chairs and the rooms and everything, and I asked questions, she started, just giving me some information. And I went home that night and I didn't sleep. I started doing as much research as I possibly could. Not only was I interested in working with them, but I was interested in the therapy for myself.
About 5 years ago, when it really all the bad started happening, that's when I started really looking into ketamine. But it wasn't until I met Charles that I actually went through with it. Because I wasn't going to go do it with somebody I don't know and didn't trust. I don't want to be in a situation where you're impaired like that and not feel safe. And at his facility, I felt really safe.
Tell me a little about the process of a new patient comes in, they meet you, they come to your place, and what happens from there.
So when somebody comes in for treatments, or if they're coming in thinking about getting treatments, they have like a first initial consultation with me. And basically what I do is I sit down with people and I share my experience and my hope with people, and I tell them that, they don't have to feel helpless anymore or hopeless, that there is something out there that can help them. And, I'm passionate about it because it helped me. And then they will meet with Dr. Ferber for their approval. Being that they get approved for the treatments, then they would come in for their treatment day, because we normally don't do approvals and treatments on the same day. When the patient comes in and they're ready to start their treatments, they'll be brought back to the room by Jessica, our nurse, sat in one of our comfortable lazy boy chairs. Their vitals are taken, blood pressure is taken. And then Jessica would go in to administer the medicine. There's 3 different ways to administer the ketamine, and the first way would be orally with a troche, and it's a sublingual dose. The second way is just intravenous infusion, and then the third way is an IM or intermuscular shot. And what we have found is that the intermuscular shots are having a truly profound healing effect on people, because ketamine really works best when it's healing people when people are in a disassociated state.
By dissociation, it means that your cortex and your limbic system, so the part of your brain that's higher order, and your feelings were dissociated. And there's a lot of benefit to the dissociation, because people who live through traumas, for example, don't want to relive these traumas. So it takes away the emotion from the actual experience. The typical dose is 0.5 milligrams per kilogram. It's done over 40 minutes. They've used this for certain studies about depression. They've also done it for post-traumatic stress disorder. And they've seen that more than 2/3 are able to feel better within a short period of time. So when you use the IV, it's usually within 24 to 72 hours, patients feel that they're less depressed. However, this may not last up to a week or even up to 3 months. So that's why we do these ketamine sessions once a week or twice a week for the course of 3 weeks. The most important thing is that the patient feels safe, because they're about to go on a potential journey, right? That can uncover certain trauma, things that are in their sub or unconscious state.
It's not that you're taking the drug as a trip. A trip is something you take as a relief, and then you go back into the same prison you were before. These are to help, and this is the essence of our vision here, is to help people transform themselves to go on in their own mysterious journey in a rapidly evolving society.
Well, this is definitely one of those kind of treatments where, of course, people might have anxiety going into something like this because it's the fear of the unknown, which is perfectly understandable. But once people go in for their first treatment, it's very euphoric. It's very relaxing. You feel a very warm, loving feeling. So it's quite pleasurable, actually.
there was a loving kind of feeling that made me, that told me, you need nothing. You don't need money. You don't need cars, house. All you need is love. The Beatles had that right. All you need is love. And that's really what got me through the session, because I had other thoughts and going in different directions. And I tried not to get sidetracked, but just let this beautiful, orchestrated movie scene of my life, of me, of who I am, just unfold before my eyes. I had to just kind of step back and just let it and see this whole thing, this whole process happen before me.
We remind them during the session, whatever you see is a movie from your own mind. You're only the watcher, the witness, that which is aware of what's coming up.
Once I had the medication, it was absolutely amazing. The sense of anxiety went away within about a minute and a half. And something inside of me just said that everything is gonna be okay. And I thought about my daughters, and I was told they would be okay. And I thought about my family and what was happening in that moment, and just literally felt encapsulated by love.
I just laid back and I told myself, I can't do what I do with therapists. I can't do that. I don't want to influence myself. I want to sit here and I want to let it tell me what I need to be. Like, I'm going to shut it all down. It's my rock bottom. I don't want to continue to do what I'm doing. My first dream, I remember it vividly. First thing I know is I'm like snowboarding down a mountain in North Carolina with my brother, my cousin, and it's so white. The snow is so white. And then all of a sudden it like disappears, like it just all drops off. And that's when it started getting like kind of dark. But then I was able to get control. Okay, positive thought, you know. But the problem is that many of the young positive thoughts when I was young always ended with something bad. Like if I'd had the most amazing Christmas from my mom and dad, it would end up with her angry, screaming at us and beating us. You know, she'd give us a PlayStation, a four-wheeler, a snowmobile, a pair of skis. We're sitting there playing with it, and like 4 hours later, she'd be like, "Oh, you don't appreciate anything we give you?" So it was hard the first time because I'd go from one very positive thing, and that positive thing always led off a cliff to something very negative. And I'd go down that path. Many times many of my visions was I was in a Rubik's Cube of a world. And that's what I would usually like go back to. So as I'd be asleep, I'd see it'd build a block around me.
Having a mystical experience is actually very therapeutic. They can relive trauma and not have the emotion associated with it anymore.
It sometimes helps people go back to see their past traumas from a different point of view and to let them go. To realize that doesn't affect me anymore, and it's okay that it's happened. I accept it, but it no longer serves me, and I no longer identify with that person.
You know, during a couple of Chad's experiences, he actually had a visitation basically with his deceased brother. And during one of his experiences, they actually went whitewater rafting together. And Chad had told me that it was such a vivid experience that he looked over at his brother and told him to put suntan lotion on so he didn't catch a sunburn.
First time we was on a rafting trip, and it was him and my whole family. And what should have been like a 2-hour raft trip turned into like an 8-hour trip. He went underneath the waterfall, and he didn't wear a life jacket, and see, he can't really use his arms that much or legs. So I had to dive down and grab him. And that's pretty much the way it took for the first 2 or 3 treatments, until I got better and better control of it. And I don't know if I would say better control. I think what had happened is acceptance of the visions was really what it was. I think that's what really changed it, because I started accepting what I was seeing more instead of fighting it. Because my brain and my head wanted to go one way and I was trying to push it to next. So when I let it start to play and then I accepted it, that's when it got easier.
In my experience, people change as much in a set of sessions as they sometimes will take 2 to 5 years of psychoanalysis or other kinds of intensive therapy.
I didn't really know what to expect, but it was a feeling of such relaxation and comfort that it was like, it's okay. Everything is gonna be okay. I felt no fear. It was a very intense, loving, nurturing experience.
I went home. I was exhausted. I slept until about 10:30. I woke up and felt like I could run a marathon. Like I had felt like Superman. I mean, I felt so good inside. Because I think you've been so suppressed for so long and you've held yourself down that when you don't feel that anymore, it's just like the most amazing feeling.
I woke up and I had a sense of peace, and thank the universe that peace has not left me, and continue to feel amazing effects.
So our brain is plastic. What that means is that we're able to form new nerve cell transmissions or synapses or synaptogenesis. So what happens when you use ketamine is you have a rapid antidepressant effect. It works extremely fast. It has a short half-life, so it doesn't stay in your body for a long period of time, but then it creates neuroplasticity where you can actually go back to the session in your mind in the future so that you can start feeling better. So during the journey, you're starting to feel joy or happiness or hope and perhaps, less pain.
By the 3rd treatment, I started finding more acceptance with myself. All the bad memories that went through episodes 1 through 3 and such, they don't appear no more. It's like peeling back an onion, and each treatment is just peeling back one more layer until you finally get to the core. By the time the 6th treatment came, I felt like a whole different person. I felt so at peace, so at ease. I felt assured that some of the hard things I went through to get to where I'm at were worth it.
What we try and help people remember is that let go is the way. That when the old habits come back, you just let it go. You say, no thanks, no more. Remember the relaxation. We teach them basic breathing techniques to stay centered in their being.
My anxiety has subsided in just such a way, and it doesn't mean that I don't get triggered or that I don't feel anxious at any moment. It's just not as debilitating as it used to be. I've just been able to handle things that are coming at me with just such peace and such grace that I didn't have before. I was on 5 different medications that were prescribed, and then Benadryl, over 250 milligrams a night that I would take to try to sleep. After my first treatment, I started weaning myself off of all of those medicines. It's been so fabulous to not have to be tied to these medicines, and knowing that it's not a Band-Aid, that it's not a numbing agent, that it's physiologically working. It continues to work, I feel.
I've seen people who've carried traumas for 40, 50 years lose it in 2 or 3 sessions. People who had much therapy, who can say things like, I don't know how I've carried it so long. It's become part of me. I didn't realize I could be free of it.
By doing the ketamine treatment and going through with it all, it eliminated the guilt and the burden that made me feel like I deserved what I got. Because I was able to actually visualize and see it and subconsciously know. Before, I wouldn't confront people that did things like that to me. I would just ignore it because I would always think in my head, oh, I deserved it. I must have done this, so I deserve that. And this time I go, I don't deserve that. Nobody deserves that. I actually, when I went to North Carolina last time, I confronted my mom. And I never had the courage or strength to do it. But I actually did it. In December, I went and I confronted her. And I knew my dad would backlash, and so would one of my brothers or whatnot. I said, but I don't care. You know, this is my life, and I'm not gonna live in that shadow anymore. I'm not ashamed. I didn't do anything wrong. And I told her, I was like, you were abusive. And I mean, it allowed me to deal with it. And I wasn't even mad when I told her. I wasn't mad at both of them. I was just done. I've harbored it for so long. When I walked out of there, those mistakes are just mistakes. That's it. They have no weight anymore. It feels lighter.
And whatever I've learned from each treatment, I've been able to carry on. So it's been a true life changer for me. I've been doing so much more with my family. We have the most fun ever. We spend, have movie night, or go to Sanibel and ride bikes, or go kayaking, or just go to the beach and watch the sunset. My girls are extremely happy to have their mother back. My vision for ketamine itself is for it to be a go-to for mental wellness, for our vets, and for people that suffer, just like I did, from PTSD and from past trauma.
The profound and the long-term healing really happens because once you're able to just let go of what was holding you back, there's nothing to stop you from having an amazing, different future.
Ketamine-assisted psychotherapy is having the therapist help them set up for their intention, and then also helping them start on the integration skills. And that is extremely important because the only way for ketamine to be durable, the only way for the fact that these patients are getting a medication, a few sessions over the course of a few weeks, how is it gonna stay? How are they gonna not relapse? And relapse is a big issue. Integration is really helping them with lifestyle changes. We talk about movement, nutrition, meditation, breath work, journaling. Ketamine really becomes this catalyst that opens them up to making these lifestyle changes. And they're really able to get rid of a lot of trauma. And so a lot of this is trauma work. And if you are treating a patient, let's say for pain management, and all of a sudden what comes up is a sexual trauma or someone who has passed away in the past, they have to work this out with a therapist. They have to have someone that they can speak to about what comes up during their sessions. And then the integration is really how we can have the effects last longer.
Okay, I've seen the results, I've seen the research, but I want to understand, why isn't this medicine more widely used?
The insurance in the ketamine industry is really a huge obstacle. So right now, ketamine is mainly being used off-label. But one of the challenges of using it for your off-label use is that generally insurance companies are not going to cover it.
Which is a problem because it limits the access. So people who have insurance would likely come for ketamine sessions. Now everything is self-pay. So obviously we're able to do things off-label, meaning treat people who have more than just treatment-resistant depression, because that's the only indication. However, there's so many people suffering, and the biggest issue is that they can't afford it. If we're able to do more clinical research and get the evidence showing that ketamine can be effective in certain conditions with certain protocols, then we're able to offer it through insurances, and more people are able to have this treatment as a possibility.
That's another thing that needs to be broken, is the taboo that, that ketamine's an anesthetic and that's the only thing it should be covered for. Is like what it's doing for people in the mental health industry is doing things that all of these other medications like benzodiazepines and SSRIs, which are antidepressants, and antipsychotic medications aren't doing for people. Ketamine actually goes in and it basically does the surgery and gets the job done, so you don't have to be on a daily medication for the rest of your life.
I look at ketamine now as, after I've used it properly and been administered by the correct facility, as just amazing to allow my subconscious and everything repair itself. To finally get to the bottom and the final layer of that onion to pull it off. I mean, I don't think without it, I would never got there.
This can help veterans. I know, I'm a veteran, I know. I've had suicidal thoughts, I've been there, I'm there, and I'm getting treatment, and what glorious treatment it is.
You have childhood trauma as a kid, we all do, we carry that forever, and it could be a crutch against us or whatever it is, and we can't break the patterns, and we can't use resilience or discipline to win out. If anything, we try it, we fail, we get worse. So how do you break the pattern? How do you shift? You got to disassociate, you got to create new neural passageways. That's new ways of thinking that gets rid of the old roadmaps in your mind to excel. Charles, tell me about the misinformation out there, the misnomers that the public thinks about this, and what are they not seeing or viewing wrong that we can help their perception to view this in a way that they can consider it to see if it's good for them?
A lot of these newer medicines that are going to be coming into the field, like psilocybin and MDMA-assisted therapy, a lot of these substances weren't used properly, but they have a real amazing healing property to them when used properly in a facility under the supervision of a medical team. So it's like anything can be abused, anything can be misused, but if you take these medicines and you use them with the intent of healing and use them as a tool for meditation, it's basically going to propel people's healing journey exponentially faster in the right direction.
When speaking of psychedelics, there's a ceremony around them. And I think that physicians are actually interested in this because we are used to our clinical setting, and it's very important when we give someone ketamine, for example, the setting, and the dose. But the setting is really important. So we're learning about other indigenous cultures, how they use these medications in a ceremonious type of way. And there's a huge spiritual component, there's a component of community, and I think it's interesting for physicians to learn the way that people used to practice and bring back some of their culture into the future of medicine.
We're really seeing some tremendous research that's really demonstrating the efficacy and the safety of these compounds, which is very, very important. There's really kind of two facets of FDA approval. It's number one, proving out the safety of the product, and number two, proving out the efficacy. And right now, the psychedelics are showing a great safety profile with tremendous efficacy.
I would like to see people who don't have much knowledge of it, who are in need, research it, understand it, talk to other people who've done it. Don't have any inhibitions, just get the information, see if it's for you, try it if you think you're stuck, and if it works for you, you pass the torch forward.
I think that I would have had much greater success with getting sober from using psychedelics if I really would have had somebody to integrate this kind of stuff, and that's what the difference of what this whole new era of these medicines is really, that's taking place now, is that they're being used for a therapeutic reason. From somebody that had a life that was a complete train wreck, and I was completely lost, and my life was completely unmanageable. And I never thought that anything was gonna make me feel better or get me to a place where I didn't have to just take as many different substances as humanly possible to try to escape. These medicines saved my life. Along with meditation and a lot of self-work, these medicines saved my life.
As I was leaving my self-wellness, I couldn't help but to think about light. I reflected on the change that occurred in these people's lives. It created a change which allowed for self-transformation, a change that was true to them, a change that brought a newfound sense of freedom. I know now this change, as rare as it may seem, is available to anyone looking, anyone on their journey who is searching to feel just a little bit lighter.